9 hours on an operating table, and I woke up to 73 missed calls. My throat felt shredded from the breathing tube. My spine was locked in a brace I couldn't even feel yet. And the phone on my hospital tray was blowing up like a fire alarm. I dragged it closer with a hand that barely worked and pressed play on the one voicemail that mattered. My father's voice, calm, almost cheerful. "Honey, don't be upset. We sold your condo to pay for your sister's wedding. You were under, so we signed for you. 300,000. It's handled. Handled." My home was gone while a machine was breathing for me. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I could barely lift my arm off the mattress. But I made one phone call, and what happened after that was nothing any of them saw coming, because by the end of this, the same people who called it just a condo would be standing in a room full of witnesses watching their own life collapse in real time. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where families show you exactly who they are the second they think you can't fight back, and where the quiet ones always finish what the loud ones start. If you've ever been told your sacrifice was simply expected because you were the strong one, this one's going to sit close to the bone. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe, because the ending on this one is worth the wait. A nurse named Alina came in to check my vitals and told me the surgery had gone well. 9 hours, 3 levels fused, an old injury from my army days, finally rebuilt. I'd been the one holding the clipboard 1,000 times. Now I was the body in the bed, and I hated it. I asked her to replay the voicemail, thinking maybe the anesthesia was bending the words. It wasn't. My name was Dana Whitfield. I was 34, a surgical nurse, and my brain doesn't do panic, it does assessment. Sold. Signed. Out cold. 3 facts stacked like a triage board. Somebody had put my signature on a legal document while I was unconscious in that very building. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a forged signature waiting to be proven. "Alina," I rasped. "I need a copy of my anesthesia record. Every timestamp." She blinked like I was confused. I wasn't confused. I was already building a case before I even knew there was one, because whoever signed my name did it while a surgeon's hands were literally inside my spine. That condo wasn't square footage to me. I bought it at 28, 2 years after my second deployment as an Army combat medic. The bank nearly laughed me out of the office. Single woman, government salary, a back that ached on cold mornings. I put down every dollar I'd saved and walked out with keys to a 3rd-floor unit overlooking a parking lot. I cried on the empty floor that first night because I didn't own a chair yet. 6 years of double shifts, packed lunches, and vacations I skipped so I could pay that mortgage down early. By the time I went under the knife, I had nearly $300,000 of equity in those walls. Not greed, just proof. Proof that no one could ever tell me to walk out of my own home again. My family knew exactly what that place meant. 4 months before the surgery, my father had half joked about me borrowing against the condo for Kayla's wedding. I said no, flat, no hesitation. I thought that was the end of it. I've since learned that for some people, no is just an opening bid. Here's the part people get wrong about me. I'm not naive. After that conversation, I did 3 things. I told my father plainly the condo wasn't anyone's ATM but mine, and watched his jaw tighten. I called my bank and flagged my accounts. And I dug up an old emergency power of attorney I'd signed years earlier before a deployment, naming him in case something happened overseas. I'd never revoked it, until 2 days before my surgery, sitting in the pre-op waiting room. I signed a formal revocation and handed my father a paper copy across his kitchen table. "Just cleaning up old paperwork before I go under," I told him. He nodded, set it by the fruit bowl. I felt covered. That's the cruelest part of this whole story, the small, clean feeling of thinking you'd protected yourself, right before you find out your signature still somehow ended up on a deed anyway. I had killed that power of attorney in writing. So how exactly had they used it? They discharged me 4 days later. My surgeon was thrilled, clean fusion, pain-controlled, already shuffling the hallway with a walker, which is the box they need checked before insurance wants the bed back. Reality hit me in the wheelchair on the way to the curb. I had nowhere to go. My condo, the one with the recovery bed I'd set up myself, the bathroom rails I'd installed, technically belonged to someone else now. I couldn't drive. I was in a brace from hip to shoulder blade, banned from lifting anything heavier than a gallon of milk. So I called Renee. Renee Ellis had been my closest friend since nursing orientation 12 years earlier, the kind of friend who shows up with a cooler and a folding cot without being asked. She drove me to a short-term furnished rental 2 miles from the hospital, got me into bed, lined up my pills, made me eat soup. While she fussed, I pulled out a fresh notebook because the Army taught me one thing above all. When everything's chaos, you make a list and you work the list. Page 1 dates. Surgery date. Voicemail date. The date they claimed I signed. Renee watched me write left-handed since my right shoulder wouldn't cooperate. "Dana," she said gently, "who are you calling first?" "Your mom." I shook my head. My first call wasn't going to anyone in my family, and that surprised even her. I called a real estate attorney named Daniel Marsh, recommended years earlier by a co-worker who'd survived a brutal divorce. Propped on 3 pillows, I laid it out in the flat voice I use for shift handoffs. Patient stable. Home sold. Signature possibly forged. Details unclear. Marsh listened without interrupting. Then he asked 3 questions back to back. "Was there ever a power of attorney naming your father?" "Yes, an old one." "Did you revoke it?" "Yes, 2 days before surgery in writing." "Who's the buyer? Whose name is on the new deed?" "I didn't know yet." Long pause. Then he said something I wrote down word for word. "Dana, if that deed was signed under authority you'd already killed, it may not be worth the paper it's printed on, but nobody's going to hand that to you. You'll have to prove it, step by step." I almost laughed. Nobody had ever handed me anything in my life. "Get me the closing documents," he said. "Deed, settlement statement, notary block, everything filed. Don't confront your family with specifics. Just listen and write down what they say." I hung up and underlined one question so hard it tore the page. "Who is the buyer?" Somebody had paid for my home. I intended to find out exactly who and exactly what they knew. My parents showed up that afternoon. Of course they did. My mother, Linda, came through the door first with grocery store flowers and a casserole, like noodles could paper over a stolen deed. My father, Frank, hung back near the door wearing his wounded but reasonable face. "Sweetheart, we've been worried sick," Linda said. "You called 73 times after the surgery," I said. "Not once before." She started talking fast, the rehearsed-in-the-car voice. Vendors needed deposits. The market was perfect. They'd take care of everything. I shouldn't stress in my condition. Then she said the line I'd hear in my sleep for weeks. "Honey, it's just a condo. Your sister only gets married once." Just a condo. This was the same woman who'd helped me haul a couch up 3 flights of stairs into that place. My father finally spoke. "You were always the strong one, Dana. We knew you'd understand. Kayla needed this. You don't." I didn't raise my voice. I've learned the calmest voice in the room is the one people remember. "Who notarized my signature?" I asked. Silence. My mother glanced at my father. My father looked at the carpet. "It was all handled properly," he said, which is exactly what people say when nothing was handled properly at all. Then he made his first real mistake. "Vince took care of the paperwork end of it." Vince. I wrote that name down the second they left and drew a box around it. Before they walked out, my mother delivered the part meant to trap me, dressed up as concern. Deposits were already down on the venue. The dress was paid in full. A honeymoon block booked. "If you do anything rash, you'll ruin your sister's wedding," she said, smoothing my blanket like I was 8 years old. 3 weeks, Dana. 3 weeks and it's done, and we all move on. There it was. The deadline is a weapon. They thought the clock was on their side, that I'd never blow up a wedding already in motion, that I'd swallow $300,000 to keep the peace. For one tired, drugged, aching minute, I almost bought their math. Then the medic in me clicked back on, because a deadline isn't an emotion, it's a number on a timeline, and timelines are the one thing I'm best at reading. 3 weeks wasn't their advantage. 3 weeks was my window. After they left, I stared at the box name, Vince, and started to plan. Then a problem landed on me like a dropped weight. To prove the deed was void, I needed my copy of the revocation. The paper my father had set by the fruit bowl. And the originals of everything that mattered, my old deployment binder with that power of attorney, were sitting in a file box, in a closet, inside the condo I no longer had keys to. I'd protected myself with a piece of paper, and they'd locked that paper inside the very thing they stole from me. If you've ever been the strong one everyone leaned on until the day you couldn't even stand up, you already know exactly how this felt. Stay with me. The moment I find out the exact time they put my name on that deed is coming, and it changes everything. Comment, the strong one, if this has ever been you, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens at the rehearsal dinner. Marsh moved fast. Within 2 days, he'd pulled the recorded documents from the county and the file from the title company. He emailed the scans, and Renee held the laptop steady since sitting up still made my back scream. There it was, the deed that erased 6 years of my life. Buyer's name printed in plain black letters, Vince Kessler. My father's business partner of 20 years, the man who came to Thanksgiving and complained about contractors. All cash. And the price stopped me cold. $300,000, not $425, not market. They'd sold my $425,000 home for $300,000 in cash to my father's own partner. Even foggy on painkillers, I knew exactly what that was. Not a sale. A fire sale to a friend, priced to move fast and quiet. Which meant my father had lied in that voicemail too. The $425 he'd announced like a favor never existed. Wherever the difference went, it had likely vanished straight into whatever he owed Vince. Marsh said it plainly on the phone. An all-cash deal, well under market. To a close associate of the man holding the power of attorney, that's not a red flag, that's a parade of them. Then he told me the title company that closed it, a small outfit my father had used for years, run by a man he golfed with. Every door in this thing led back to the same handful of men shaking hands in a parking lot. And the signature, Marsh added carefully. I've seen your real signature on the engagement letter. The one on this deed doesn't quite match. We'll want to look at that closely. That night I couldn't sleep, so I had Renee pull up every signature of mine she could find. My license, my hospital intake forms, an old birthday card. We lined them up next to the deed signature on screen. Mine has a hard downstroke on the D, a habit from signing charts fast. The one on the deed was rounder, more careful, like someone tracing what they thought my name looked like. Close enough to fool a stranger. Not close enough to fool me. But the thing that actually stopped my breath wasn't the handwriting. It was the notary block at the bottom, certifying that Dana Whitfield had personally appeared and signed. Marsh told me something I didn't know. Notaries keep a journal, a log of every signing, and a careful one records the exact time. He'd already requested it. When it came back, it carried a timestamp, 1:47 in the afternoon. On the day of my surgery, at exactly 1:47 p.m., a notary swore under oath that I stood in front of her and signed away my home. I knew roughly where I'd been at that moment, but roughly doesn't hold up in court. I needed it pinned to the minute, in writing, on letterhead, and I knew exactly which department in that hospital could give it to me. My little sister Kayla called the next morning, 27 years old, the bride. Her voice pitched somewhere between apology and accusation. Dana, why are you making this about you right now? I let the silence stretch, because silence makes guilty people fill the air, and she did. She said she'd known Mom and Dad had figured out the money, that she hadn't asked for details, that she just assumed it was handled. Handled. The family verb for a thing they'd done to me. They sold my home, Kayla, I said. A pause, then softly, in our mother's exact cadence. It's just a condo, Dana. My own sister, reciting the family recipe. Something in me went very quiet and very clear. She hadn't forged anything. But she'd chosen, deliberately, not to look too closely, because looking might have cost her the perfect day. Did you ever once ask whose money was paying for your venue? I asked. No, she admitted. I didn't want to know. And that was the whole rotten engine of it. Nobody had done this out of hatred. They'd done it out of comfortable not looking, the quiet belief that Dana was a renewable resource who'd always regenerate whatever they took. I told her I loved her and hung up before she could hear my voice crack. Then I called medical records and requested my complete surgical file. Every page, every timestamp. I wanted to look Vince Kessler in the eye first. Renee drove me to his office, a low brick building off the highway with his name on the sign. I went in slow on a cane, braced stiff under my coat. He stood up behind his desk and had the decency to look uncomfortable for about 2 seconds before sliding into the same reasonable man act my father wears. Dana, you're healing up. You bought my condo, I said, staying on my feet because sitting and standing both hurt, and standing read better. Your father had authority, he said, spreading his hands. Cash, clean, recorded. Nothing improper. You bought a $400,000 home for $300,000 from a man whose daughter was unconscious in surgery. He didn't flinch, which told me everything. Your dad and I go back 30 years. He owed me. This squares us. He said it like a man who'd rehearsed sounding clean. Owed me. This squares us. So that was the real engine. My home hadn't paid for a wedding. It had paid down my father's debt to his business partner, with a flower arrangement thrown on top for cover. Vince leaned back, comfortable now, delivering the line he'd clearly been saving. I'd let this go if I were you. Good luck proving anything from a hospital bed. I smiled, the small, calm smile I give patients right before delivering news they won't like. I've worked from worse positions than this. You'd be surprised what I can prove flat on my back. The medical records came back in a fat envelope, and I read them the way I've read 100 charts, except this one was about me. Intubation logged at 11:02 a.m. Then page after page of vitals, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen, tracked in tidy columns straight through the afternoon by law and by habit. At 1:45 p.m., stable rhythm, surgeon mid-procedure. At 1:50 p.m., the same. At 1:47 p.m., the exact minute a notary swore I stood before her and signed my name, I was face down on an operating table with a tube in my throat and another human being's hands inside my open spine. There is no version of that story where it's true. I called Marsh and read him the Times. For the first time I heard him get excited in that careful lawyer way. That's about as airtight an alibi as you'll ever get, he said. Then the catch. It proves you didn't sign it, and it strongly suggests forgery. But to collapse the deed entirely, your best weapon is still that revocation. The paper proving the power they used was already dead. We need to find it. The problem, the physical revocation was locked in that file box, inside the condo I couldn't enter. I lay awake half the night furious about it. Then, around 3 a.m, I bolted upright so fast my back punished me for it. I'm a careful person, careful to the point my friends tease me. When I signed that revocation 2 days before surgery, I hadn't only handed my father a paper copy. I'd scanned it and emailed it to my old military legal contact, a habit drilled into me overseas, where you back up every important document 3 ways because you might not make it home to the original. I grabbed my phone and searched my sent folder. There it was, an email sent 2 days before my surgery, 3 days before the closing, attached. A clean scan of the signed, dated revocation of power of attorney, metadata and all. 2 full days before they put my name on that deed. I had already killed the power they used to do it. It had been sitting quietly in my sent folder the entire time I lay in that hospital bed thinking the proof was locked away from me. I forwarded it to Marsh at 3 a.m. with one line. Found it. Look at the date. He called back at 7, and I could hear the smile in his voice. This changes the whole shape of the fight. Marsh laid out the plan like a surgeon walking through a procedure, which is the only way I can absorb news like that. We'd move on 3 fronts at once. First, a quiet title action in civil court, asking a judge to declare the deed void. A power of attorney revoked before use, plus a forged signature, means the deed conveyed nothing, no matter what was recorded. Second, a criminal referral, using a revoked power of attorney to transfer property and forging a signature on a deed isn't a family squabble, it's a matter for police and the DA. Third, a claim against the title company's underwriter, since their own notary had certified a signature the anesthesia record proved was physically impossible. Every one of these you file, you sign, you decide, Marsh said. I draft, but the moves are yours. That mattered more than he knew. Nobody was rescuing me. I was picking up every tool myself. Then the warning. Once we filed and recorded a notice of pending litigation, it went public. Vince couldn't resell or refinance. Good, but my family would know within days. There's no quiet way to do a thing this loud, he said. I looked at the calendar. 18 days to the wedding. Then let's make it loud, I said. On my schedule, not theirs. The hard part wasn't fear of looking ungrateful. I stopped caring about that label years ago. The hard part was knowing my father could face real criminal charges. My mother must have smelled it coming, because she called that evening in tears before I even said hello. Dana, please, whatever you're planning, don't. Do you want to send your father to prison over a building? She knew exactly which thread to pull. I sat with it, felt the full weight of being the one who could end this or escalate it, and thought about the math they kept running. The math where my life's work was always the variable they could solve for. Mom, I didn't do this, I said. I didn't forge a name. I didn't sell a home that wasn't mine. He did that. I'm just refusing to keep paying for it with 6 more years of my life. She called me cold. I told her I was being clear, and that those two things only looked the same to people who counted on me staying warm enough to rob. I hung up gently, but I made a decision I held onto for the next 2 weeks. I would file and let the machine move, but I would choose the moment myself. The one room where the truth would land with the most witnesses and the least noise from me. There was only one room like that. We filed. I signed every page over video call with my real signature, the hard downstroke and all. Back aching, resolve steady. The quiet title complaint went to civil court. A notice of pending litigation was recorded against the condo, freezing it legally. Vince couldn't sell it, couldn't borrow against it, could only sit and watch his clean cash deal turn radioactive. The same week, Marsh delivered the full package to a detective in financial crimes, a woman named Ruiz, who called to confirm the timeline herself. I read her the anesthesia times. I read her the revocation date. There was a silence on her end I'd come to recognize, the silence of someone realizing a case just got very easy to believe. The first wave hit fast. My mother's furious texts told me Vince had called my father in a panic the second the pending litigation showed up in a routine title check. The clean deal was supposed to vanish quietly into county records forever. Instead, it was flagged, frozen, and sitting under a detective's eye. My family knew I'd moved. The flowers stopped. The casseroles stopped. The calls shifted from sweetheart to how could you? And underneath it all, I felt the pressure building toward one fixed point on the calendar, the rehearsal dinner, a week and a half out, where 2 families would gather in one very expensive room. They thought I'd stay home and lick my wounds. I had a brace, a cane, a folder, and an invitation. If a boundary you set was ever called selfish by the very people benefiting from you having none, you understand this in your bones. Hit subscribe, because what happens at that rehearsal dinner is the part one most want you to see. My father came to the rental alone. No flowers, no act this time. He looked older, gray at the edges, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in his truck. He sat on the beige couch and put his face in his hands. The Riverside project went under, he said, not looking up. I lost everything in it. I owed Vince $140,000 and couldn't pay. And Kayla's in-laws, the Whitmores, they've got real money. I couldn't stand them seeing us throw some cheap wedding, like we were nothing. I didn't know how else to not look like a failure. His voice cracked, and I believe every word, and it changed nothing. Because then he lifted his head and asked the only thing he'd really come to ask. Drop the lawsuit, just until after the wedding. Let Kayla have her day, and we'll figure out the condo after, I swear. Even broken, even crying, he was still asking me to pay. Not borrow. Pay. You didn't borrow from me, Dad. I said evenly. You didn't even take from me. You erased me. You put a stranger's hand on my name and sold the one thing that proved I ever stood on my own. He stood, and the softness curdled into the thing it always becomes when men like him don't get their way. You're going to embarrass this whole family, he said at the door. You'll regret it. No, I said quietly. I really won't. After he left, I built the cleanest folder of my life because I decided the rehearsal dinner was where this would end, and I wanted the truth to need no narration from me. 1 page, the revocation, signed and dated, email timestamp printed beside it. 1 page, the deed with the forged signature, paired with the notary's journal entry logging the signing at 1:47 p.m. 1 page, the anesthesia record, vitals ticking through 145, 147, 150, a machine breathing for me. 1 page, the recorded deed showing Vince Kessler, all cash, $300,000 for a $425,000 home. And 1 page, a short letter from Marsh stating plainly that a deed executed under a revoked power of attorney, bearing a signature certified at a time the signer was provably under general anesthesia, was void. 3 copies. No rehearsed speech. The documents were the speech. Then I practiced the harder thing. Standing. Renee brought me a darkwood cane. Almost elegant. Nothing medical looking about it. And I walked the length of that rental and back, brace holding my spine straight as a flagpole. My physical therapist would have been proud and horrified. They expected a woman who couldn't stand. I was walking into that room on my own 2 feet. Kayla called 4 days before the wedding, and her voice was different, the rehearsed sweetness gone. I heard there's police. A detective went to Dad's office. "Dana, what is actually happening?" So I told her, plainly. The old power of attorney. The revocation, signed 2 days before surgery. The forged signature certified at 1:47 p.m. while I was on the table. Vince. The debt. The cash deal under market. I laid it out like a chart and let it sit. Long silence. Then small. "They told me you'd agree to help. That you wanted to." There it was. The lie they fed her to keep her hands clean. "I never agreed to anything, Kayla. I was unconscious." I heard her breathe. "The whole wedding," she said slowly, like she was seeing it for the first time. "The venue, the dress, all of it. It's your house," I said. She didn't apologize, not yet, but something had shifted, and I could hear it. The sound of a person realizing the foundation under her perfect day was someone else's stolen home. "I have to go," she whispered and hung up. For the first time, one of them had asked the question that mattered, what actually happened, and hadn't liked the answer any more than I did. The rehearsal dinner was at a country club with valet parking and a fireplace big enough to stand in. The Whitmores were paying for dinner itself, a fact my mother had mentioned roughly 40 times, the exact reason my home had been liquidated in the first place. Grant Whitmore owned a chain of car dealerships. His wife Patricia wore real pearls. They were the precise audience my parents had bankrupted me to impress, which is exactly why the truth belonged in that room. My father's whole crime had been about appearances, about never looking like a failure in front of these people. So these people would be the ones to see it clearly. I confirmed I'd attend. My mother sounded relieved, because they thought my coming meant surrender, that I'd swallow it, sit quietly at the family table, play gracious sister, sort the money out later, the way I always sorted things out by absorbing them. "I'm so glad you're coming, sweetheart," she said. "It means everything as family." As family. I held on to that phrase. They wanted me there as scenery, proof to the Whitmores that we were warm and whole. I'd be there as family, all right, just not the way they pictured. I laid out a dark blue dress that hid the brace, flat shoes I could stand in, and packed the folders into a leather bag. My mother found me in the lobby 20 minutes before dinner, steering me by the arm toward a quiet corner near the coat check. "Now listen," she murmured, smiling for the room. "Whatever's going on with the lawyers, tonight is not the night. The Whitmores are here. If you make a scene, you'll lose this family for good. Is a building worth that? It's just a condo, Dana. Don't blow up your sister's day. Just a condo." The third time from her lips. Maybe the 30th overall, the family hymn. I looked at her careful church smile, at the pearl she'd borrowed to match the Whitmores, and I felt the last bit of hope I'd been carrying quietly set itself down. "It was never just a condo, Mom," I said, even almost kind. "It was the one thing in this family none of you built. That's why you could take it without flinching. You never put $1 into it. So it never felt real to you that it was mine." Her smile twitched. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being calm. You should be grateful. A dramatic person would have called the Whitmores last week." Her face went pale under the lobby lights. A bell rang, calling everyone to the tables. "Let's go in," I said, taking my own arm back. "I'd hate to be late. I have a toast to give." I'd spoken to Marsh that afternoon one last time. The legal machine was already running, quiet title filed, pending litigation recorded, Detective Ruiz already requesting interviews with both my father and Vince for the following week. "You don't have to perform anything tonight," Marsh reminded me. "The facts will do their work in a courtroom regardless." I knew that, but I also knew something he didn't, something only a daughter knows. My family didn't fear courtrooms. Courtrooms were abstract, months away, easy to spin to neighbors as a misunderstanding. What they feared, what my father had bankrupted me to avoid, was being seen plainly by the exact people whose opinion he'd sold my home to buy. This wasn't about winning the case was already winnable. This was about making sure that when I won it, no one in that room could ever tell the Whitmores some softer story afterward. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the truth said once, calmly, with paper behind it, so it could never be folded back into the family myth. The dining room glowed. 40 people at long tables, candlelight, the Whitmores holding court near the head, my parents performing warmth, so hard you could see the strain. My father spotted me, and his face did something complicated, relief and dread at once. He took my elbow and steered me toward the Whitmores like a prize. "Grant, Patricia, this is my older daughter, Dana." Surgical nurse, served 2 tours, our strong one. So generous, always taking care of the whole family. So generous. I shook Patricia's cool hand, smiled, let him stand there basking in the lie, because the higher he climbed on it, the farther it was going to fall. I took my seat. Kayla caught my eye from across the room. No smile, just a question on her face. I gave her the smallest nod. Salads came and went. Wine was poured. And then, right on schedule, my father stood and tapped his glass. I just want to thank everyone for being here as our families come together, he began, voice thick with feeling. A wedding like this takes sacrifice. I'm proud of how this family pulls together when it counts. How everyone gave what they could to make Kayla's day perfect. He raised his glass toward me, inviting the room to admire his fiction. I set down my napkin and stood. Since we're toasting sacrifice, I said, let me say a few words about my sister. The room turned toward me, warm, expectant. Kayla went still. My father's glass hovered. I kept my voice gentle, almost soft, because the calmest voice in a room is the one nobody can look away from. Kayla, I love you. I have since the day they brought you home. So I want both families here to know exactly what paid for tonight. I reached into the bag. 3 weeks ago I had spine surgery. 9 hours under general anesthesia. I lifted the first page. While I was unconscious, a deed was signed selling my condo, my home, worth $425,000, for $300,000 in cash, to my father's business partner. A murmur moved through the tables. My mother's hand flew to her throat. The deed bears my signature. I went on, setting the page down where Grant Whitmore could see it. Certified by a notary whose own journal logs me standing in front of her, signing, at 1:47 in the afternoon. I laid the anesthesia record beside it. This is my surgical chart. At 1:47 that afternoon, I had a tube in my throat and a surgeon's hands in my spine. So I'd like someone to explain whose hand actually signed my name. Total silence. You could hear the candles. 2 days before that surgery, I said, placing the third page down, I had already revoked the power of attorney they used. In writing. Timestamped. A deed signed under a revoked power, with a forged signature certified at a time I was provably unconscious, is worth nothing. The sale was never legal. The condo was never theirs to sell. That's when my father exploded, slamming his glass down, so hard the wine jumped. How dare you? After everything this family has done for you. Everything this family did for me, I repeated, voice steady while he shook. Dad, you sold the proof that I ever stood on my own. You didn't do something for me. You took the one thing I built without any of you. I'm just taking it back. My mother was crying, grabbing for the Whitmores. It's a misunderstanding, please. But Patricia Whitmore had already picked up the anesthesia record and was reading it, her face the careful blank of a woman recalculating an entire family in real time. I let the silence sit, because some silences are evidence too. Then I gathered my pages, unhurried. I didn't come here to ruin a wedding, I said to the room, and I meant it. I came so no one could pretend this didn't happen. The police already have the file. A detective will be speaking with my father and Mr. Kessler this week. I set one full copy of the folder in front of my parents. Gentle, like something fragile. That's for you, so there's no confusion later about what was said tonight. My father sank into his chair like the air had left him. My mother sobbed into a napkin. The Whitmores sat in stunned, upright horror, their borrowed warmth gone cold. Then Kayla stood. The whole room watched my little sister push back her chair in her engagement dress, face wet, and walk the length of that table past our parents to reach me. She didn't absolve them. She just stood beside me and said, loud enough for the Whitmores to hear, I didn't know it was this. I swear I didn't. I should have asked. I'm so sorry, Dana. It wasn't everything. But it was the first true thing anyone in my family had said in 3 weeks. I took her hand, picked up my cane, and turned to go because I'd said what I came to say and the rest belonged to the courts now. Every step toward the door hurt, brace biting, back screaming. I walked it anyway, slow, straight, on my own 2 feet, exactly the way I'd practiced. The law moved the way Marsh promised, only faster, because nothing simplifies a case like a forged signature going up against a time-stamped anesthesia record. It took most of the summer, sworn declarations, a stack of filings, but it was lopsided from the start. Faced with my surgical chart and the dated revocation, Vince's attorney did the math, and told him not to bother defending a deed he couldn't win. Rather than gamble on a trial he'd lose, Vince agreed to a consent judgment. The court declared the deed void. Title returned to my name, where legally it had never actually stopped being. The pending litigation notice had done its job the whole time, freezing the property, so Vince could never quietly offload it onto some innocent buyer. The title company's underwriter, staring down their own notary's impossible certification, settled with me fast and quietly, covering my legal costs, and then some. Forgery is exactly the disaster title insurance exists to eat. And the criminal side didn't just vanish the way my family assumed it would. Detective Ruiz interviewed my father and Vince the following week. I didn't attend, didn't gloat. I gave my statement, handed over my documents, and let the system carry the weight I'd spent 3 weeks lifting alone. Vince Kessler, who once told me good luck proving anything from a hospital bed, found himself explaining to a financial crimes detective why he'd paid cash, under market, for a home whose owner was unconscious in surgery at the time. My father found himself explaining why a power of attorney he'd been formally handed a written revocation for had still somehow been used to sign his daughter's name. Those conversations had consequences, the slow, grinding legal kind that don't make for a dramatic scene but follow a person for a very long time. A few months later, I stood in the middle of my own living room again, empty, because Vince had cleared out furniture he'd never had the right to touch but mine. Afternoon light fell across the same floor I'd cried on the night I moved in, 6 years earlier. I stood there a long time with my cane and my healing back and let myself feel the one clean thing in all of it. This door was mine again. The wedding didn't happen, not as planned. The Whitmores, it turned out, had less appetite for marrying into a family under criminal investigation than they'd had for pearls and a country club. Kayla postponed it. We're slow now, careful, rebuilding something smaller and more honest than what we had. She comes by sometimes, helped me pick out a new couch, and hasn't once called this place just a building. My parents and I speak rarely. I didn't cut them off with some grand declaration. I just stopped being the account they could always draw from. My mother still sends the occasional message about forgiveness, by which she means forgetting. I answer kindly and briefly, and I don't forget. My father's case is still moving through the system at its own gray pace. I went back to work as soon as my surgeon cleared me, back to the oar, back to being the calm one holding the instruments. Except now, when a patient's wheeled in and the anesthesiologist starts the clock, I think about how carefully that record gets kept every 5 minutes by law, and how a thing built to save a life ended up saving mine in a way no one in that operating room could have guessed. Here's what it took losing my home for 9 hours to learn. Love that only ever flows one direction isn't love at all, it's an invoice. And I stopped paying it the day I realized my name, even traced by someone else's hand, still belonged to me. That's how a quiet woman takes her life back. 9 hours under, 73 missed calls, 1 revoked signature they forgot I'd already sent to myself. If this story reached something in you, tell me in the comments about the line you finally drew with someone who counted on you never drawing it. And subscribe to Silent Revenge Stories, where the people everyone underestimates are always the ones who get the last word.